Jake turned his truck onto a desolate highway, the road dissolving into a dense, suffocating fog. The hum of the engine was his only comfort. As shadows loomed just beyond the headlights, the mist thickened unnaturally, wrapping around the truck like ghostly tendrils. Every mile felt heavier, as if the road resisted his passage. Jake sensed something. Watching. The air electric with unseen malice. The rhythmic rain on the truck's roof now sounded like whispers out of the mist. A pale figure appeared, motionless on the roadside, its wide black eyes reflected. No light, its face in a motionless void, a ghostly silhouette on a fog-shrouded highway, eyes unnaturally dark and staring blankly ahead. Jake slowed instinctively, but dread gripped him as the figure's mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. Without a word, he floored the gas, speeding away from the haunting visage, a pale figure by the road, his face contorted into an unnaturally wide, horrifying smile, desperate for human connection. Jake grabbed the C radio, but only static answered. The silence felt alive, pressing against his sanity like the weight of the fog. A trucker, gripping a radio in a dimly lit cabin, surrounded by silence and encroaching mist. Jake drove for hours, but the fog remained unrelenting and unbroken. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was moving in circles, trapped in some malevolent design. A faint light appeared. A desolate parking lot, illuminated by flickering lamps. Relieved, Jake parked, locked his doors, and tried to rest. His dreams were fractured by images of black eyes and twisted grins. The sense of being watched lingered, even behind closed curtains. Awakened by a primal dread, Jake peeked through the curtains. 3 figures stood in the mist, their black eyes fixed on his truck. The figures emitted guttural growls, vibrations that rattled the truck's walls. Jake scrambled for the ignition, but the engine refused to turn. The figures advanced, their movements unnervingly smooth like gliding specters. Jake's trembling hands twisted the key again, the truck finally roaring to life. The truck lurched forward, leaving the creatures behind in the swirling fog. But their growls echoed, haunting the dark road ahead in the rearview mirror. The creatures ran unnaturally fast, their forms twisted by the mist. Jake gripped the wheel tighter, the truck roaring down the endless road. The city lights finally emerged, the creatures halting at its edge as if bound by an invisible barrier. Jake parked under bright lamps, his heart pounding with residual terror. The Kes radio crackled to life, a fellow trucker's voice breaking the silence. Giorgio, not the first. We've all heard the stories of the fog. Other truckers shared their experiences, figures in the mist, endless roads and disappearances. The stories painted a picture of a cursed stretch that trapped its victims. Jake realized the truth. The road wasn't linear, but a looping nightmare. No escape, just an unending circuit where the fog and its horrors reigned. The fog returned heavier than ever, swallowing the road in an impenetrable shroud. The oppressive silence descended once more, and dread gnawed Jake's mind. The creatures emerged again, their hollow eyes and grotesque smiles unchanged. They glided closer, the truck's engine faltering against the oppressive presence. The sea key crackled with frantic voices. Contrary, you can't escape, don't stop. The voices faded, replaced by a haunting static that chilled him to the core. The creatures broke into a sprint, their inhuman speed closing the distance. Jake's truck roared forward, but the figures loomed larger in the mirrors out of the mist. Another parking lot emerged, its lights dim and flickering. Jake stopped, hoping against reason for sanctuary, but dread simmered in his chest. Jake felt the oppressive gaze of the figures before he even saw them. They stood motionless, their gaping maws emitting a low guttural growl. The creatures moved past their previous limits, surrounding the truck with malice. Jake realized the city lights were no longer a sanctuary. The engine roared to life, Jake driving blindly into the mist. But the road ahead twisted back toward the haunting figures. The realization struck like thunder. There was no escape, only the loop. Jake was a prisoner of the fog, and the creatures were its jailers. Jake stopped the truck, turning to face the figures as they glided closer. The growls became a deafening chorus as the fog consumed the cabin. Figures closed in their black eyes, the last thing Jake saw before darkness claimed him. The truck vanished, swallowed whole by the fog, leaving no trace behind. The haunted road remains luring the unwary into its endless nightmare. Somewhere in the mist, Jake's truck waits, its engine silent, its driver gone.